we don't have, like, I don't have anything. I shouldn't have an estate plan. So why should someone still have an estate plan if maybe they don't own assets? Or what should that look like for people who maybe plan to have assets but don't have anything yet? Should they even start with an estate plan? Like, how does that look?
Yeah. So first of all, the argument that we don't have anything is BS. And it's really just a way to keep us separate from the legal protections of our wealth. We have assets. And the problem is that most of the estate planning attorneys, it's predominantly older white men, right? That they dominate that space. Less than 1% of estate planning attorneys or comprehensive estate planning attorneys are people of color. And so when we talk about when should someone get started, everybody needs an estate plan at 18. I don't care how much money you have, because an estate plan is not just what happens when you die. It's also what happens if you get sick, what happens if you're in a car accident, what happens if you get shot, what happens if you are not around to make decisions for yourself, if you're in a coma, if you have a heart attack, you have a stroke, dementia, all things that are on the rise in the Black community, particularly in younger ages. What happens to your family if that happens to you? Well, most people don't realize that nobody's legally allowed to step up and take care of you. You have to ask a judge for permission. It's called a conservatorship or a guardianship proceeding, depending on where you live. And so when we think about estate planning, it's not just about how much money you have. That's not the barometer. If you're 18, there is some form of estate planning that you need. It's just not going to be the same one that I need or that you need or that the person down the street needs. Everybody's estate plan is customized to their situation. But if you're over the age of 18, you have to have at least the minimum.
Okay. So imagine that I'm 18. I know I look at, for people who are not watching video. So if I'm 18, then what is the minimum that I should have to get started?
Yeah. So it's really going to be three main things, right? The first is going to be your property power of attorney. And this might be called something different in your state or jurisdiction. But in essence, what it is legally authorizing someone to step up and handle your financial and property affairs if something happens to you. Nobody can legally sign your name. So if you're in a coma, who accesses your bank accounts? Who pays your bills? Who makes sure your rent is paid or that your car note is paid so it doesn't get repossessed while you're in the hospital? Who is able to call and start a lawsuit on your behalf if some car hits you down the street, right? You need to make sure that you have a legal representative that can step up. And people say to me, hey, it's my spouse or my parents. And the reality is, if you're over the age of 18, you do not have a legal representative. If your kids are in college and something happens to them on college campus, that school, while taking your tuition check, is not going to talk to you. That landlord, unless you're signed on that lease, is not going to let you in because they legally cannot. And so you need to have a property power of attorney that says, if I am unavailable, this is the next person who has legal authority over my assets and my estate and me as a person, right? That's number one. Number two is going to be your healthcare documents. Who makes your medical decisions? If you are in the hospital and you need some form of long-term care or treatment plan, who decides? Who decides if they pull the plug on you, right? Again, people go, oh, my spouse will do it or my parents will do it. But the reality is neither one of them actually has the authority over the other. Nobody trumps. And if we remember, there was a case in this Terry Schiavo case. I don't know if you look young, so I don't know how old.
Oh, yeah, I'm 18. Remember, I'm 18.
Girl, I don't know if you actually remember, but there was a case. It was the Terry Schiavo case, and she, had a brain injury. She ended up in a vegetative state. She had recently been married about 2 years, right? And her spouse was like, we talked about it. She wouldn't want to live this way. We should pull the plug. And her parents were like, we think you put her in this state, right? Boom. No judgment. I don't know, right? But her parents were like, we think you put her in this state. So we're going to give our daughter an opportunity to fight. Who wins? How do you pull the plug? If the person themselves didn't say what they wanted, who wins? And what happened is nobody won, right? They fought for 15 years. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It became this right to life case. It got kicked back. The court did not decide on giving one person the authority over the other because they said not everybody has a good spouse. Not everybody has parents. Not everybody's married. We can't set a blind rule. If you're over the age of 18, you need to decide who makes your medical care, your medical decisions. And if you don't, then a judge needs to sit down and look at the characters in front of them and make a decision from that point. But we're not going to set a bright line rule that says automatically you get to be that, because everybody's situation is different. And so what we know from that case and what we know from other cases is that if you're over the age of 18, you need to make those decisions. Otherwise, it goes to a judge. Nobody has an automatic right to do that. The third thing that comes into play is your distribution plan. And this is what most people think about estate planning. They think the distribution plan is it, and it's not, right? Because the first two have zero to do with how much money you have and everything to do with the fact that you are now a legal adult in our society. So nothing to do with money, everything to do with age. The third one is where the variety comes in. Your distribution plan, it varies, right? Because if you've got 10 cents in the bank, your distribution plan is probably going to be really simple, right? It might be a simple will that says everything I own goes to these people, whatever it is, the clothes in my closet, my car, if I have one, right? Like that's it. Or if you've got minor kids, your distribution plan may be more complicated. It's likely going to include a trust that says, how do I protect these assets for my minor children if something happens to me? If you own real estate, in most states, you need a trust to avoid the probate process. Probate is a 100% avoidable process if you have the right estate plan for your asset levels. And so if you own real estate, you're likely going to want to have a trust-based structure. Now, there are differences in that, but as an overarching rule, it's pretty good basis, right? If you have lots of millions of dollars, you probably have multiple trusts as well as business structures, as well as other things that are going on. That's your distribution plan. And that will depend on how much money you have, what your assets are, right? Your family structure. Are you in a blended family? Do you have minor kids? Do you have adult kids? Do you have special needs children or beneficiaries? Do you have no children, right? And then what are your goals? What is it you're trying to achieve with your estate plan? Because you might have less assets, but a more complicated structure because you're trying to create intergenerational wealth. And so you may do a more comprehensive structure because you want to preserve what you have. And so it just depends. But everybody over the age of 18 needs those three things: a property power of attorney, healthcare directives, and some form of a distribution plan. A plan that is going to, at the bare minimum, avoid court interference.
Okay. Whoa, that was a lot. Okay.
Did you love this episode of Share the Wealth Show? If you know of someone who would benefit from this information, don't keep it to yourself. Share the wealth and make sure to leave us a rating and review. We'll see you for next week's episode. Subscribe so you'll be notified.